in terms of the US pulling out of Afghanistan, we've clearly seen the shift in the theater from South Asia to the Indo-Pacific. What lessons does our own history offer us so that we can become a formidable maritime power?
Well, I'd like to point out something for the umpteenth time, and which I think I pointed out. I was the first to point it out, and it's been my fate, let's put it, that I'm never taken seriously for a long time, and finally I'm taken a little more seriously, and finally my thinking becomes mainstream, and then people educate me about my own thinking that they had rejected when it was first evolved. So, but I'd like to point out that, in the case of Afghanistan, I'd like to say that pulling out of US troops was correct. US troops should not be in Afghanistan. The Afghans are a proud people. They don't want foreign soldiers there, whether US or any other country. Mm-hmm. But removing logistical support from the Afghan military was a disaster. Right. And that's something which Trump also agreed to. Frankly, Trump began the disaster, the countdown disaster, by ignoring the Ashraf Ghani government. You have a legitimate government in Afghanistan, which is completely sidelined in favor of a group of violent extremist individuals who have been killing with abandon. I mean, what is the lesson that the government learns? It loses morale. It loses its will to fight. And the loss of morale and its will to fight began with that disastrous agreement at Doha, which was agreed to, I'm sorry, by Donald Trump. And then Joe Biden making the, in my view, unpardonable error of withdrawing support to the Afghan National Army. Unless you continue with logistical support, air support, and other logistical support, unless you, for example, continue with Bagram and 2 or 3 other locations from where you can give that support, you are condemning the Afghan military. And the Afghan military was kneecapped. It was hit below the knee. It was hit on the knee. It could not fight anymore. And the most unkindest cut was Biden saying, oh, we expand some of them in their military. Basically, they know the truth, but they are talking something to cover up their own folly by blaming it on the Afghan military. The Afghan military was groomed in such a way, trained in such a way, that they could not fight without US logistical support. They could not fight without that. But with that support, they would have overcome the Taliban. And unfortunately, Joe Biden withdrew that support. So I would like to point out, given the reality of the Sino-Wahabi alliance, again, Biden saying, no, we're not going to focus on Afghanistan and let the Taliban take over. We're going to focus on China. Let me remind President Biden something which obviously his people must have told him, that the Chinese and the Wahhabis are now in a close embrace. Yes. That Chinese use Wahhabis, frankly, to create diversions for the West. And they learned that from 9/11. George W. Bush was essentially very, very, strong on dealing with China. And you remember there was an Orion aircraft and so many other issues. And suddenly 9/11 erupted, and George Bush's entire focus shifted to Afghanistan and then to the Middle East. He took his eye off China. So this Wahhabi extremism has always been a great diversion from attention to China. And the Chinese have basically empowered and energized the Wahhabi, pretty openly. They're very close to Pakistan. They're very close to Turkey. They're very close to the Taliban. Right. They appointed an ambassador to the Taliban when the Ghani government was still in power. Can you imagine? You have a government in power. You have an ambassador representing your country in that government. And you have another ambassador representing your country to the Taliban. So they knew what was going to happen. Obviously, their friends in Pakistan and had told them this is what the Americans are going to happen. They're going to pull out. They had prior knowledge. And this prior knowledge would have been shared by the Afghan military also. And therefore, there was no way they could have continued the fight. It would have been suicidal. And no human being wants to commit suicide except a few very misguided people for very misguided reasons. So I only want to say, frankly, that the security is a seamless entity. You never know where, who has set a fire and where the fire will spread. So from that point of view, whether it's the US, whether it's India, any world power, and India and the US are both world powers, well, you have to understand that no theater is exempt. Afghanistan concerns us all. The Taliban concerns us all. When the took place, I predicted that it's going to incentivize, modules and terror groups across the world, independent modules, terror groups. And you're seeing a rash of this kind of activity take place because of the fact that they feel that, okay, the Taliban succeeded. So tomorrow we can succeed in what we want. We can defeat America. And if we can defeat America, we can defeat other countries that are not as strong as America in defense. So I'd like to point out that events have consequences. There's a Chinese saying, if I remember, that the fluttering of a butterfly wing affects the entire planet. So in that sense, I'd like to say, we can't, the Biden pivoting away from Afghanistan into confronting China. Well, among the major fronts the Chinese have opened up is the Wahabi front. And Joe Biden better learn that he needs to confront that as well. And I think the poor man has understood his lesson. He's not saying this kind of thing anymore. And he is, I think, now, but he is still in a situation where not enough is being done to tackle this problem, especially in Afghanistan.
Please remember to subscribe to us and switch on the notifications for this channel. For our other social media links, more content, and to support our work, please visit citti.net. Dhanyavad. Namaskar.